Jesus' resurrection? Obviously, this key doctrine.
So I would like before I get to the resurrection, we do have an audience question. So Jamie is one of my favorite listeners. He's a good friend of mine, and he brought this question up on a previous episode that we had talked about. How do we understand the humanity and divinity of Jesus? And do you mind taking an audience question real
No,
quick?
fine.
Okay, awesome. So Jamie asked, I'll put it up on the screen here. Do you think that the mind of the Logos was fully present in Jesus? How should we think about his humanity and divinity? And then he adds to this, so this is the second part of his question. Where was the mind of the Logos while Jesus was 4 dividing cells in the womb of Mary?
I tell people that when we get to heaven, we're going to be able to have a press conference with God, and we can ask these kinds of questions, and we probably won't care by the time the press conference comes. But taking it more seriously, the confession of the church is that Jesus was fully human and fully divine. So to the extent he has full human consciousness and he has a divine power and authority, that's combined in his person. What we don't know, this is important to say, what we don't know is how he chose to utilize that structure of who he was. Okay. It's clear that in some cases he, I want to say, restricted or limited or did not draw on the access of all the elements and attributes that he had, and then there were times when he did draw on it.
Sure.
So, so to me, the 4-cell question relates to that's actually not an issue or a problem until we get to human consciousness, and think about it from that kind of way. Because at the core of the question is really what's the relationship between the two, and Jesus chose not to use all the capabilities that he had. I think the Temptations, for example, show that. So on the one hand, he's constituted this way, but what he's drawing upon as he lives his life is a different deal. So much so that he can be seen as an example of living as authentically human.
Right on. Yeah, go ahead.
And so that's at least the angle I would take, or the trajectory I would take in answering that question.
No, I think you're right. And we have to keep in mind at the same time, for our listeners' sake, that first of all, you have this unique being, namely God, that
unique being. There's nothing never been another human being like him.
Right. Nothing like him in creation. And then this unique being does another unique thing, namely incarnation.
Right.
And so this is something that I have to admit and be honest, I cannot grasp. I believe the Bible. Whenever we read that God became man, I believe the testimony of the church fathers whenever they say that, and can I understand it? Can I comprehend it? Yes. Can I understand it fully? Absolutely not. And so
the dynamics are what we don't understand. We can understand the categories and the claim,
right?
But it's the dynamics that we wrestle with because what we don't know are, like I said, are the choices of limitation that he also undertook, because Philippians 3 talks about him emptying himself and taking on the form of a human being. So
that's right.
Was that he clearly has the authority of God and exercises that authority. He clearly has access to the power of God when he chooses to use it, that kind of thing. But what that means across the board there, it's the question the Muslims ask, how can God die? It's a good question. And that's because of the way in which, obviously he's alive. He's alive even in his human death. Okay. But he's also really dead as a human and buried. So that would be the way I would go at it.
So that's, I think you floored Jamie. Actually, I know you did, because he said that. So I'm floored. Thank you for the thoughtful response. And so we really appreciate that, Dr. Boch. As far as the resurrection